January 17, 1944. Bougainville, Solomon Islands. Dawn crawled over the steaming jungle canopy like a reluctant flame, dragging mist upward from the damp earth. The air was thick with the smell of rot, cordite, and crushed bamboo. Somewhere beyond the tangled vines, a single metallic note echoed in the silence, the faint clatter of a rifle bolt being tested in the twilight. It was a sound the men of the 145th Infantry Regiment had come to associate with one man, a quiet, almost forgettable farmer from Ohio who carried a weapon many of his comrades still joked about. A rifle, they said, looked like something ordered from the back of a magazine, light enough for a farmhand, strange enough to stand out among the standard-issue Garands around him. That man was Sergeant Frank Hoback, and the rifle was the M1903 Springfield, but in his hands it was more than government steel. It was a tool he understood down to the smallest nuance of breath and trigger, a symbol of the simple American belief that an ordinary citizen, armed with skill and patience, could meet the darkest moments of war with quiet precision. The men around him expected just another humid morning of harassing fire from the tree line. The Japanese had dug themselves deep into the jungle, their snipers hidden in the latticework of branches, their silhouettes indistinguishable from the shadows they lived within. The Americans knew the pattern: a sudden crack, a snapped twig, the thud of a soldier falling before anyone understood where the shot had come from, and then hours of paralysis, pinned to the mud by unseen marksmen who seemed to grow from the forest itself. Asterisk. For weeks the Japanese had held superiority in this deadly form of warfare. Their snipers arrived with reputations forged in Manchuria and the Philippines, trained to remain motionless for days, to become branches, knots, and patches of darkness. They expected another day of dominance, another day of terrorizing a jungle-bound American regiment into immobility. But the day was not going to unfold as they expected. Frank Hoback had been listening, watching, counting rhythms in the gunshots, studying the trees the way a farmer studies the sky before a storm. And he had been waiting for the moment when the Pacific morning light would shift just slightly, revealing what human training could imitate, but not fully replicate by mid-morning. The first Japanese sniper revealed himself not through movement, but through stillness too perfect to be natural. Hoback saw it, a shape too symmetrical to be bark, too rigid to be vine. He inhaled once, letting the jungle fade beneath the steady rise of his rifle. The spring field cracked. A small cloud of leaves drifted down, and the regiment finally exhaled for the first time that day. Word spread quietly through the company line. He got one, then another, and another. Within the first 24 hours, Hoback recorded 3 confirmed sniper kills. The men around him stopped laughing at the rifle. They stopped joking about its old-fashioned appearance, its mail-order look, its farm boy simplicity. They began to understand that a weapon was only as old or as modern as the hands that held it. The historical records from Bougainville describe a shift that occurred almost immediately. Japanese snipers, who had once chosen their shooting positions with confidence, now tested their movements with hesitation. They stayed deeper in the canopy, rotating locations more frequently, no longer certain they were the hunters. And that uncertainty mattered. In jungle warfare, hesitation was death. Inactivity could collapse an entire defensive perimeter. Military intelligence notes from the 37th Infantry Division later described the phenomenon in clinical terms. Enemy snipers blacked out in predictable intervals, showing avoidance behavior atypical of previous weeks. But for the men on the ground, it felt simpler. Something in the forest had changed. The fear no longer ran just one direction. Throughout that week, Hoback hunted with a methodical patience rooted not in aggression but necessity. The Japanese pattern was relentless, firing from treetop nests, shifting angles, pinning down supply routes, threatening medics and runners. The Springfield's bolt echoed again and again beneath the towering palms. Each shot a reminder that discipline could counter brutality. A recurring object began to define the American lines during those days: a simple can of peaches, a ration almost too sweet for the battlefield. its syrup carrying a scent that felt impossibly out of place amid the mud and rot of Bougainville. The can followed Holback everywhere, tucked into his pack or resting near his shooting post. Marines and soldiers alike often recalled that the one unmistakable symbol of American abundance in the jungle was the glint of ration tins reflecting the sun. To the Japanese, who lived off meager rice balls and rainwater, the sound of a tin being opened became a quiet reminder of a nation that fed its fighters with more than survival. It fed them with the taste of home. Between sniper engagements, Holback would pry open his peach can with the tip of his bayonet, its metallic ring startling against the hush of the undergrowth. The sweetness gave him energy in the long hours of lying prone, but more importantly, it offered a moment of normalcy, a reminder that he had come from fields far quieter than these. Where peach trees grew in the calm of Midwestern summers dot by the third day, the Japanese elevated their efforts. They deployed their most disciplined marksmen, some wearing captured American gear, others camouflaged in ghillie-like cloaks woven from jungle foliage. They believed themselves invisible. They were trained to be. But Holback's method was different. He did not search for men. He searched for inconsistencies. A branch too cleanly broken, a knot of leaves shaped against the wind, a shadow that defied the sun's direction. He marked time not by hours, but by the life cycle of insects. Around him, the shift in mosquito swarms at dusk, the change in cicada hum during the hottest hours, the silence that followed tropical rain. In that rhythm, he found the enemy dot by the end of the fourth day. The count reached 11. 11 trained Japanese snipers neutralized. 11 killers who had once terrorized the American perimeter, now silenced by a man with a rifle, many had dismissed outdated. The Springfield's bolt had become the regiment's reassurance. Its echo was no longer just a sound of combat. It was the sound of protection. One Army correspondent writing after the war noted the psychological effect. The removal of enemy marksmen resulted in a morale shift disproportionate to the number of casualties. Soldiers began moving more freely, speaking more openly, and resting more deeply. They felt watched over. The Japanese, however, felt something else. Reports recovered after the battle described confusion and bitterness among their sniper teams. They had expected poorly trained American infantry. They found a man whose patience and discipline mirrored their own, but whose endurance was strengthened by a belief unfamiliar to them. The symbolism of the peach ration, small, unimportant in appearance, became a larger commentary on the ideological divide. One Japanese soldier later wrote that he could not understand how American troops always seemed supplied with sweetness, even in the darkest swamps. That sweetness, the literal taste of home, became Holback's quiet weapon. The simple ration tin, clattering softly as it rolled on uneven ground, reminded the Americans that they came from a land where abundance was normal, not exceptional. A land that could send both bullets and fruit across an ocean. In a war of attrition, that mattered. In a war of ideology, it mattered even more. As Holback's reputation spread along the Bougainville perimeter, younger soldiers began watching him as he worked. They learned not the mechanics of shooting. Many could already handle a rifle, but the discipline of observation. He taught without words, demonstrating how to let the jungle reveal itself rather than rush in to find its dangers. The fourth day closed under a sky tinted gray by drifting smoke from scattered skirmishes. Holback cleaned his rifle with the same steady rhythm he used back on the farm when maintaining his tools before winter. The spring field, scratched and darkened by tropical humidity, looked nothing like a modern instrument of war. But he did not need it to. The rifle was merely a conduit for duty. What mattered was the man behind it. The transformation that unfolded during those 4 days was not just tactical, it was ideological. The Americans discovered that ingenuity, patience, and individual skill could counter even the most disciplined enemy. The Japanese discovered that morale could crumble when their most feared weapon, their unseen sniper force, was dismantled not by overwhelming firepower, but by a single man whose only advantage was a quiet, unwavering resolve long after Bougainville was secured. Veterans remembered the sound of Hoback opening his peach ration. The small metallic click had become something symbolic, the reminder that democracy, at its core, rested not on grand speeches or massive offensives, but on ordinary citizens who carried a piece of home into extraordinary circumstances. That America's strength lay not only in factories and supply lines, but in the simple comfort that even in jungles half a world away, a soldier could taste something sweet. Historians later wrote that the defeat of Japanese sniper teams on Bougainville opened pathways for larger advances, allowing American units to move with confidence rather than fear. It contributed to the broader strategic momentum in the Solomons campaign. But the deeper truth remained quieter, almost hidden, that a single soldier's steadfastness could alter the emotional landscape of an entire regiment. Years later, when the jungles reclaimed the foxholes and the sniper's nest rotted into the earth, the echoes of those 4 days survived only in recollections and diaries. Veterans spoke of a man who never sought glory, who preferred the stillness of farm fields to the terror of canopy warfare. But they spoke also of the rifle, the mail-order weapon that had once been mocked. It became a symbol of the American story, underestimated, unassuming, yet devastatingly effective when placed in capable hands. In the epilogue of the Bougainville campaign's official history, one line stands out: victory often belongs not to the loudest force, but to those who endure in silence. That silence was Hoback's domain. He embodied the truth that freedom is defended not only by sweeping offensives, but by small, determined acts of duty carried out when no audience watches, when no medals are guaranteed, and when survival depends on the steadiness of one man's breath. And somewhere in that jungle, in the memory of those who serve, the faint metallic rattle of a peach can still roll across the soil. A reminder that even in war's darkest corners, the simplest objects can carry the greatest meaning. A symbol of a nation that believed in its ordinary citizens, and of a soldier who proved that belief justified. Asterisk.